The Bible says we battle not against flesh and blood,
Right.
but against principalities and powers. Okay, but what's the key to that verse? We battle.
Yeah.
There is a battle going on continually. We're never not at war. There's always a spiritual war that is going on that manifests itself into some of these trends. The wind of the Spirit moving produces real, tangible things on this planet that you can see with the feel.
To think that the United States doesn't have spiritual evil within it and within its institutions, is wrong. And that's why we need a Bible culture. That's why we're doing a podcast. What are we standing up for? The ability, the freedom to do what's right as God defines that right.
God's the ultimate author of liberty.
We don't want government to stand between us and our freedom to do what is right.
Again, welcome to the Bible Nation podcast. I'm Doug Levesque. I'm here with two of Michigan's top cultural influencers, Tony Nash, the owner of AZ Business Solutions in Owasso, specializing in all forms of advertising and promotion, as well as Jason Georges, the pastor of Emmanuel Baptist Church in Corunna, Michigan, one of the most active movers of societal thought today. And guys, thanks for coming in again. Good to have these discussions with you. I hope we're making progress in our
thanks
culture
for having
and
us.
in
Good
society.
Always good to be here.
Today we're going to be talking about wars and rumors of wars. That's a universal thing. You could be in any decade of human existence and talk about wars and rumors of wars. But we're going to talk about it in light since COVID, okay? Potential of war since COVID. And we invite all of our listeners to participate and let us know what they think. The best culture is a Bible culture. It's proven and it works. Check out all of today's topics, articles, books, and of course our podcast at BibleNation.org. Thanks for listening. Well, guys, back in March of 2020, I wrote a couple articles. We all were overwhelmed by the potential of a societal global pandemic that could kill us all. And for 2 weeks, we held our breath and we made necessary changes. And then we're hearing alternative messages. We're hearing things that sound a lot like 1984 George Orwell political speak, And so we began to say, what? You told us, give it 2 weeks, give it 4 weeks, give it 7 weeks, and we'll clear this thing. And we're not seeing the numbers. We're not seeing the math. We're not seeing this. And yet all of a sudden we had a overturning of society, global wide, and a change in vocabulary and a change in tenor. And so I wrote a couple articles. One was about COVID. We talked about COVID. And I wrote this article called COVID-19 Wars. These 2020 hotspots may spill over this summer. And here we are kind of at the same time of year in 2021. We're calling it a post-COVID back to normal world, but not really, because all of a sudden now the new normal is redefined as having the shot or the new Delta variant. And now double mask or two kinds of America. Fauci said there's going to be two kinds of America. Well, that's division. That's civil war. There's the red and the blue states, sort of thing.
Well, we have the press secretary coming out this week saying they're going to go door to door for those who have not been vaccinated.
Yeah.
They're doing a whole campaign.
Yeah, so we've got two different thoughts going on here on what's going on. And so the potential for war around the world and civically for a civil war in the United States, I didn't go and print off and bring to bear all the articles that I have been saving regarding the potential of civil war in America. And from foreign governments, from India, from England, from Europe, and everyone's saying it's about to happen, it's about to happen, it's about to happen. So for the last 4 to 6 months, there's been this explosion of talk that, man, America's on the verge, of what's going to happen. And so Americans are like, dum. No, we're getting back to normal. So I thought it'd be good to revisit this wars and rumors of wars, and particularly the potential for forms of war in the United States. So I'll just start on this. We won't get through this, but I want to discuss these different war hotspots. War is usually a result of political anxiety, health and monetary systems failing, or mistrust among nations. We have all three. While we have always had wars and rumors of wars, and even a number of world wars, the prospect of a third cataclysmic nuclear, biological, and chemical confrontation has been imagined for 75 years now. From the end of World War II until now, a series of regional and Cold War efforts have been the subject of most diplomatic dialogue. Preventing such a future war was the reason behind both the League of Nations and later the United Nations. Creating a table of international dialogue has been helpful for a season, but nations have continued to develop more deadly and technologically advanced weapons. The next global war will ignite rapidly, develop fully in real time as the whole world watches on their smartphones, and escalate to a crescendo in hours and days. This may not be the Armageddon of the Bible, that will be unparalleled, but it may be World War III that we're fearfully envisioning. Here is a watch list of potential sparking points around the world. So do you get the vibe there,
Yep.
fellas?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so much in the news today because we have 24-hour news cycles and beyond just news channels like CNN and Fox, which are both fomenting the idea in different
Right.
ideals. But now we've got the countless social media outlets, including our own.
There is such a thing as too much information.
Yeah,
We're
that
seeing the results of that.
puts that there. So the first thing that I put down here was the Pacific region, because at the time, we were in this cycle with North Korea that after every new presidential election, we had to reestablish the relationship with North Korea. And so we had war games with South Korea. We put down economic sanctions on North Korea for their bad behavior with nukes. And North Korea launched a few more things and said, here it comes. So it was just the cycle, that kept on going.
Mm-hmm.
But then when COVID came, they pulled back their fist in a defensive position, ready to strike,
Mm-hmm.
And so that got heated up. And of course, Trump walked across the line by himself,
Mm-hmm.
which is just hilarious.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
Classic
we're going to
Trump.
put a Trump hotel right here in North Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And he walks across, and I don't even totally get it other than to say, what are we afraid of here?
Yeah.
And so, but when COVID happened, they shut down, and everybody said, "Where's Kim Jong Un? Did he go in the 20 stories underground, or is he sick? Did he get COVID? There's a body double,
Mm-hmm.
and then now his sister's taking over, and what's going on?" And so, what that did is it raised to DEFCON 4
Mm-hmm.
for them, anyways, and for us, we did send more fleets around to kind of exercise our muscle in what was going on. So that summer created this even more heated rhetoric and positioning that actually was more real than just Cold War rhetoric. It actually became more threatening. And I said North and South Korea have recently exchanged fire across their border. Kim Jong-un reportedly underwent a heart-related illness and botched surgery. When he supposedly resurfaced weeks later, media showed pictures of what was clearly a body double. The South China Sea is rife with conflict. China claims it pushed out a U.S. destroyer, but a second destroyer entered into the sea, along with naval shows of strength by Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, and Australia. Hong Kong democracy leaders have been arrested under the quarantine edicts by China, and Taiwan's landslide election for a Liberty candidate has infuriated mainland China. President Trump has called upon the World Health Organization to recognize Taiwan, because even we don't hardly recognize Taiwan, as a nation. So all those things were going on, and as soon as COVID went on, they just became even more interlocked and more, red alert for that. Now we say, we're back to normal, but all those things have not been resolved.
Mm-hmm.
And, even now we'd say, well, Hong Kong's about to go under,
Yeah.
and Taiwan's about to be invaded,
Yeah.
and Kim Jong-un's about to launch again. And so, a lot of people kind of don't pay attention to those things because of the background rhetoric, but COVID-19 brought about this heightening of tensions. What do you think about that Pacific region out there that you've heard, that you know? Crickets.
I mean,
Yes.
Yes.
It's a big distraction. I mean, obviously I'm not as up to date on all of those particulars, but obviously it seems like COVID is the big distraction to keep everybody focused on one thing while all these things are happening behind the scenes.
In China, they're saying this is the United States. This COVID is attack.
Yeah.
But over here, we're saying China did it, China did it, China did it, China did it. So
Right.
again, that's why we said COVID was such a, watershed moment in the world to change the world. Can we have a new world order in 90 days? Sort of thing.
Well, and the Pacific Ocean has gotten a lot smaller
Yeah.
because 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the ability for the Asian countries outside of our markets to truly influence policy and thought in the United States was very minimal. The Asian mind was very foreign to us, but now we're seeing they're very much involved in our political process and our political thinking. And COVID has kind of been the conduit.
Yeah.
That has been the trans-Pacific cable
Yeah.
that has created, that's tied us together.
Yeah.
It made the Pacific Ocean smaller. And now there's influence across both ways.
It's like when you go to a wedding and you're forced to sit at the table with your cousin and you hate your cousin, but it brought you together. And so now it's even more dangerous, with what's going on. And so now they're saying, oh, there's this Asian hate.
Yeah.
And so you've got Asian, government sponsored commercials, that's like, don't hate Asians. It's
Right.
not their fault. All this kind of stuff.
Yep.
So it's the, the making it smaller, put us in a closet together. Kamala Harris, vice president, is married to a chief lawyer for a law firm that is the main advocate for the Chinese Communist business holdings in the United States, which talk about a conflict of interest.
Right.
Like, we're intertwined there. And so, what's Biden going to do with Chinese aggression on Taiwan and Hong Kong and the Philippines? What's he going to do with it? It seems like it would be changed. It would be one-sided or the other. I love it when Trump said, buy American, we're going to beat the Chinese, whatever. And they said, is that a Trump tie? Yeah. Where's it made? In Malaysia by Chinese companies. Yeah, I thought that was great. And so, we're far more connected, but that does, and particularly with the COVID threat and fear, puts everybody, there are Chinese nationalists who wave the Chinese flag just like we wave the American flag, and who would love to finally once and for all get rid of American interests, in the Pacific region. So, I went on to talk about the Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf, and of course that came true because China and India really did go at it. I don't know if you've seen the video, but the Chinese troops are all in riot gear and the Indian troops are in riot gear up in the mountains, and they're attacking each other with sticks and rocks and fighting each other. And guys died because finally there was a few shots fired, in that. And so I say Trump ordered the assassination of Iranian leader Soleimani in Iraq, and Iran retaliated. They shot several missiles at U.S. bases and downed a commercial jet. There continues to be multiple U.S. and Iranian militias tit-for-tat clashes. Iranian speedboats harassed a U.S. destroyer, but President Trump ordered the next provocation to end in sinking them. Iran has promised to retaliate if sanctions are renewed, and the U.S. pulled back from Kurdish areas and other forward bases in Syria and Iraq in order to shrink exposure. Of course, we just pulled out of Afghanistan now, and that place is going to the dogs faster than anybody could imagine. That pushes the front lines up to Iraq, where we're doing tit-for-tat bombing, the Persian Gulf, where supposedly Israel and the United States are sinking Iranian shipping, and they're retaliating all the way in the Red Sea. And so these things that we talked about haven't stopped. They haven't shrunk. They've only capitulated. So it's almost like the first domino was knocked over in these just global areas where everything continues. And of course, we can't be everywhere at once.
So, Pastor Doug, what I've been seeing coming up in the news a lot lately is the Taliban and official U.S. recognition. I saw a couple of headlines, but I haven't read any articles. How does that kind of play into this?
So the Taliban was in power and was hosting Osama bin Laden, basically, 20 years ago when we started this battle, this war. So we put them out of power, and we put in power a new Afghanistan government and a new Afghanistan army. Well, now we've pulled out. We told them we were pulling out. We negotiated, that we were pulling out. And we thought that they would hold on for a year or 5 years. Well, in reality, day one, the Afghanistan army that we trained and equipped basically retreated into Tajikistan, which means Tajikistan has a U.S. army, basically, and all of our weapons and da-da-da. And the Taliban has taken over, now is threatening the government, and China's moving in to provide military support, and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that was there, but now with post-COVID, it's very acute, and it's moved the front lines all the way up to the Middle East, to where I'm going to go next. Israel has bombed Damascus, sites linked with Hezbollah and Iranian militias. The potential to unilaterally declare sovereignty over the West Bank is inciting the Palestinians. The Lebanese border incursions have increased. Gaza continues terror activity while the IDF responds with bombs. Russia continues its Syrian, Iraqi, Iranian, Turkish, Pakistani, Afghani, and Yemeni loose but marked military alliance. It has expanded into Libya At the same time, U.S. troops are pulling out in Saudi Arabia and Egypt. So, again, I wrote this article, COVID-19 wars, summer of 2020, but all these have even just gone forward, made it more acute. The Americas, a Venezuela coup attempt fails again while President Maduro tries to prove U.S. involvement. Russian and Canadian U.S. fighter plane interdictions increase over the Northern Pacific. Canada's Trudeau bans most guns after a shooting. Many people are of the opinion that U.S. civil war is looming. So all of a sudden that exploded. It has continued to explode. That's where I want to end this conversation on civil war. Europe, Brexit causes Scotland and Ireland to make new referendums on leaving Great Britain. Belarus has begun separating from Russia economically and politically. EU has a euro that is falling apart, threatening the alliance. The Ukraine continues to be invaded by Russia. So all this was going on in 2019 prior to COVID. At COVID, it made everybody load their weapons and cock the hammer. You understand what I'm saying? All these things that were intense became real. Mm-hmm. And then over this period of time, they've all exploded even more. And so some would say that COVID-19 was pushing that chaos into sparking. And that right now we are in, a beginnings of global war. So in conclusion, in addition to these hotspots, other factors are weighing heavily on the world's militaries, including military personnel illnesses and military use of biological, chemical, nuclear warfare ensure preemptive strikes. Power grid interference, food chain breakdowns, and election interference are acts of war. Mm-hmm. So in other words, we may have lost. We may have had economic warfare, political warfare, election warfare, cultural, societal warfare. We previously had a podcast where we talked about Marxist theory, critical theory, turning into critical race theory and social justice and people being woke and wanting to overturn society altogether. The Russians said, we're going to crush you from within. You're going to fall from within. They were attacking our very points of freedom and liberty. And COVID seems to have been the overarching pendulum, falling to that side. I say cyber and space wars are now ongoing. China's got its own satellite over the Earth, and they're doing their own spacewalks, and they're sending their own Mars missions. What's going on? Special forces are increasing training, softly engaging in infrastructure sabotage, social media propagandizing, and playing with open assassination. Who just got assassinated? A year more than the Haitian president just got assassinated.
And his wife.
And everyone's saying, was it the United States? Was the United States? Was the United States? Because it was clearly a special operations episode. And I don't know the answer to that, but I'm just saying these things continue. Finally, there's a real possibility that civil unrest and outbreaks of violence among factions may take place as the vitriol has gone beyond diplomacy and entered into threats. That happened. The summer of 2020, that absolutely happened. Speaker of the House Pelosi has mirrored U.S. enemy George Soros in saying that Trump will not be president after the next election one way or another. Our governor, Whitmer, said the same thing. And of course, she had worked as some sort of intern with the Soros organization. So that's where she's taking orders or where her ideology is. Many governors have declared edicts that their constituents are rejecting wholesale. Of course, Nancy Pelosi's nephew is Governor Newsom in California. And that brings us now full circle to what is California doing that they wouldn't have done a year ago. Right. They are withholding funds or withholding political and economic exchange with states based upon, they're saying based upon how they deal with LGBTQ and transgender issues, basically forcing the issue. Right. But again, we have this Chinese Communist Party. Kamala Harris was from California. She's connected to Pelosi. The governor's connected to Pelosi. We've got China entered into American politics through California. I don't think China cares about LGBTQ and transgender policy, except that that's going to bring America down from within. Right. And so the war continues in a different idea. The final step in a new world order resetting the globe to their liking is simply war, chaos, and fear. Only a determined Christian populace, penitent, praying, and preparing can hold back evil tides and pushing through the mayhem. Let us stand together and press forward with confidence. With God, all things are possible. Matthew 19:26.
Well, and I think the listener needs to understand that the global war that we're talking about here is not going to look like initially World War I or World War II. Right. That global war has now taken on new fronts. There's a Wall Street Journal article that just came out a couple hours ago about this cyber push that Putin is making against Biden. Biden drawing some red lines, and now the Russian Putin is pushing against him and saying, "Are you going to hold your nerve?"
Right.
And so there's power struggle going on. The same thing that President Obama did with Syria and trying to draw red lines, and then a red line was then intended to be pushed against. And if a red line gets pushed against, then it tests the metal, the nerve of that other country. What are you going to do about it? And these type of lines are more than geographical now. They're not only economic, but now they're cyber. I mean, that's a whole other thing. But then entities like the World Health Organization have created new fronts,
Right.
new
We would call that
power
a fifth
struggles.
column.
Right.
We would call that a fifth column. Yeah.
And so global war, in other words, global war could be happening and a bullet and a shot not being fired.
Right.
And Tony, you know this because you're in this business. And that is, before, if I wanted to have a clothing shop, I had to have a store, I had to have, suppliers, I had to have all this. But now I can just in 15 minutes get online and start selling shirts. And so it
much more
changed
profitable.
the nature of business,
Yeah.
right? And it's business. And I think nations now are saying we don't have to shoot a tank. We can actually, through cyber, through space, through culture, through social media, psychological, we can undermine media. We're not for capitalism, but we can do capitalism in the United States. Like China funds their military
Right.
through capitalistic endeavors in the United States. And so they diversified and did
You
did
can
business
accomplish
that
the
way.
same goals that
Now,
could
I
only
will
be
say
accomplished with a
that
gun
all
before.
that is made possible because of the U.S. of A., because of a primarily Christian culture that is tolerant and open and allowing, this kind of goodwill to happen and believes it to a certain extent. But wars and rumors of wars are increasing, and they, like you said, we are in forms of warfare. Maybe always, but now the enemy's ability is very strong to, take us to war.
The Bible says we battle not against flesh and blood,
Right.
but against principalities and powers. Okay, but what's the key to that verse? We battle.
Yeah.
There is a battle going on continually. We're never not at war. There is always a spiritual war that is going on that manifests itself into some of these trends. The wind of the Spirit moving produces real tangible things on this planet that you can see, feel, and are tangible.
So there is a spiritual notion to it, and to think that the United States doesn't have spiritual evil within it and within its institutions, is wrong. And that's why we need a Bible culture. That's why we're doing a podcast, because we need to promote it.
Yeah.
So
Again, we talked about this in a previous episode, but when you have read the Bible, particularly Revelation, these types of things get your radar up because you know that what the end kind of looks like. The Bible very clearly tells us what's going to happen. So we see these things, and it's not that we're trying to be crazy conspiracy theorists, but we're paying attention. We are awake to what the Bible is teaching us, and so
it's almost a warning.
Yeah.
Because we know that in the end it's going to be more oppressive, more tyrannical. It's going to take lessons from Stalin and Mao and Hitler and then put it to work but be pseudo-Christian almost and make it messianic.
We ought not be ignorant of Satan's devices.
Right. And so I wanted to spend the last 5 minutes here and talking about wars and rumors of wars, just because what COVID did, what we had kind of predicted was happening, what's happened, and then where we are today. People might say, "Oh, peace and safety. We're in peace and safety," when in reality we're closer to some miserable and hot warfare. And particularly as people are saying civil war. Oh, that's ridiculous. That's just a bunch of extremists. That's just the media trying to work things up. Maybe to some extent. But what California is doing is waging war on their fellow states.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Massachusetts getting all the other colonies in a war against England.
Right.
It's kind of like Virginia, getting everyone else in a war against the North. And so you almost then have to kind of pick a side. It's not like everybody said, "Yeah, war." It's like, okay, now we have to weigh, and now that this has happened and this has happened, and the stair-stepping. So there was an article, California bans state-funded travel to South Carolina. This is MSNBC by Jeff Daniels. California bans state-funded travel to South Carolina, citing gay discrimination in foster law. So here is a piece of the California government
Mm-hmm.
saying we're going to make this policy and we're not going to do because we can't have gay adoptive out of South Carolina, then we're going to make sure that there's no money going that way for their agricultural people or whatever.
Right.
So it is kind of politics, it's leverage, it's economic, it's cultural,
Right.
and it's in the news and it's in the media. And of course the media is going to say, "Oh, good for you, California, poor
they're
South
woke.
Carolina." Well,
Well, how do you even regulate something like that? I mean, it's intimidation.
Well, that was published in April.
Yeah.
Now, I found articles going all the way back to September, of 2020. So this is a COVID-inspired,
Right.
empowering of certain people. So
Well,
in
and
September, they say it's going to happen. By April, it's a big news item. And then we get to June, and California bans state-funded travel to 5 new states over anti-LGBTQ. So now we're at 6 states, right, of economic warfare. And the latest is here, June 28th. California has banned state-sponsored travel to these 17 states over LGBTQ laws.
Wall Street Journal, July 1st. California's growing cultural blacklist. The state expands its Texas sanctions to Florida and others. Same idea.
So because of technology and the new forms of warfare, China's reaching through California. And they don't really care. It's not like they're open to LGBTQ issues, but they want the United States and society to fall. They don't really care about black oppression, but they're going to use woke ideology to kind of bring about this form of warfare. And so now we got state against state. Of course, the Bible says nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, right? In other words, it's regional and it's local. And I kind of saw it in sentiment, especially with Trump crowd peoples. I saw it in sentiment and I saw it in the press, like trying to build something up. And they talk about the Michigan militia, even over in England, right? Because it's got this reputation.
Yeah.
Well, it's a paper tiger, But the fact of the matter is this is really happening. California is the oppressor. They're the ones that, Governor Newsom, California would if it was listed in the nations of the world, it'd be the 10th most powerful nation in the world. Governor Newsom is a national figure waging war on the rest of us, saying he's going to run for president next time around, putting pressure on Biden to be even more leftist than he is, and Kamala Harris to do business with China. So China's waging war, and we're falling from within because our own culture is not well versed, vocabularized.
Well, and in the meantime, the media has us all completely divided over these things that we've talked about in previous episodes.
Yeah.
We're arguing over race, and we're arguing over skin color, and we're arguing over LGBTQ rights and all of these things, and we're not paying attention to the bigger picture of what's happening.
And they've grabbed a hold of, China had control with the NBA. They had control with General Motors. They had control. And so China's exercising with the NBA. Well, the NBA is going to be the first one to put mandatory masks.
Yeah.
China gives more money to Harvard than Americans give to Harvard. And so Harvard's going to come out and say everyone's going to wear masks. And so China has played a wonderful Parcheesi Chinese checkers game of
But that's the unmasked. China is the unmasking of what is nefarious here, because if California was simply making a principled stand, then it would equally apply it not only to states in our union that differ with them ideologically, but then if this is your standard, then you don't need to look any farther than China as the greater abuser of this.
Right.
So
Right.
if you want to limit state travel to a state like Texas, because there was a Supreme Court ruling, a religious freedom
it all
legislation.
It all comes back to
Always Texas.
Yeah, well, of course, that's what we got to get to here. Then there ought not be any Californian officials traveling to China.
Right.
Oh, but that's not the case.
Right.
Okay, so it's something else.
Yes.
It's something else. It's something else.
Yeah. And so people would call that conspiracy, but we try to lay out principles, try to lay out vocabulary and definitions, and then we try to lay out look and see what's going on since COVID-19, and where wars and rumors of war have been heightened.
Right.
And now we're even dealing with civil suppressions by
Yeah.
our own governor, by other governors making these mandates. I think we're going to see more and more and more of this kind of thing, not just picking on LGBTQ support or adoptions.
Sure.
I'm not just picking on that. I'm saying this is the wave of the future. And how do Christians get back by getting right
Right.
by waging spiritual battle, by standing together no matter what state that we're in. We've got to pay attention to Christians in California.
And
gotta-
I think the key is pay attention. Like I think this should
Yeah.
maybe provoke all of us watching and listening to pay attention to what's going on.
Any gubernatorial candidate here in Michigan, any national candidates, we should ask, what do you think about California withholding funds? Would
Yeah.
you do the same thing? Would you stop that? Is this illegal? Is it civil war? What would you do in response to this? This should be a talking point in future debates.
100%.
Thank you, gentlemen. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, be sure to check us out at BibleNation.org. We're on YouTube and Facebook, and of course, we want to hear from you. Thanks again, and remember, the best culture is a Bible culture. It's proven, and it works.